Who told you to stand there? Answer me. I asked you a question. Do you understand how dangerous that was? Do you have any idea what could have happened?
An Gi-suk's voice cut through the construction site like a blade. Who told you to stand there? Answer me. Joanna Okoli sat on the ground, gripping her arm, her ears still ringing from the crash of falling scaffolding. Workers were running toward her. Someone was shouting for a medic, but all she could hear clearly was the man towering above her, his jaw tight, his eyes blazing with fury instead of concern. I asked you a question, Gi-suk said again, his voice sharper this time. Do you understand how dangerous that was? Do you have any idea what could have happened? I was trying to... Joanna started, but a wave of pain shot through her shoulder and she winced instead of finishing. He didn't wait for her to catch her breath. He didn't kneel down. He didn't ask if she was hurt. He simply stood over her, his hard hat still perfectly straight on his head, his hands clenched at his sides. This is exactly why I don't like putting inexperienced people on my site. One mistake, one careless mistake, and someone could have died today. A worker named Nam Kyung-soo tried to step in. Boss, she pushed Dong-yeon out of the way. If she hadn't... I don't want excuses, Gi-suk cut him off. I want to know why safety protocol was ignored. Joanna finally managed to push herself up, cradling her arm. Her palms were scraped raw. Her knees were shaking, though she refused to let it show on her face. She looked at him directly, and for a second, something like disbelief flashed across her expression. I didn't ignore anything, she said quietly. I saw the beam swinging loose. Dong-hyun didn't see it. I pulled him back. And in the process, you put yourself directly under it. Do you understand what would happen to this project if a worker died on my watch? Do you understand what that would do to this company? The words landed like a slap. Joanna felt her face grow hot, not from embarrassment, but from something closer to shame, mixed with anger. She had just risked her body to save a man's life, and this man in front of her was worried about his company's reputation. I understand perfectly, she said, her voice trembling but steady. I understand that you don't care whether I'm hurt. You only care about your project. Gi-suk's jaw tightened. For a moment, something almost like hesitation crossed his face, but he pushed past it. You're done here, he said, effective immediately. I don't have room on this site for people who act without thinking. The workers around them went silent. Even Nam Kyung-soo, who had tried to defend her, looked down at the ground, unwilling to argue further with his boss. Joanna stood there, injured, humiliated, and fired within the span of 2 minutes. The medic finally arrived and reached for her arm, but she pulled away gently, still staring at Gi-suk. You didn't even ask if I was okay, she said, so quietly that only he could hear it. Gi-suk opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time since the accident happened, he looked almost unsure of himself. But by the time he found his words, Joanna had already turned and walked toward the site exit, refusing the medic's help, refusing to look back. If this story is already pulling at you, don't scroll past without hitting that subscribe button. This one gets a lot deeper, and you won't want to miss where it goes. The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft beep of a monitor Joanna didn't need, but the nurses insisted on using anyway. Her arm was wrapped from wrist to elbow, and there was a bruise blooming across her shoulder that made every small movement sting. But none of that hurt as much as the words still echoing in her head. One mistake, one careless mistake. Do you understand what that would do to this company? She stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. She had done the right thing. She knew she had done the right thing, and yet she had been treated like a criminal for it.
I came as far as I could. Tell me what happened.
Her friend, Baek-sel Hwa, burst through the door minutes later, breathless, her bag still slung over one shoulder from rushing straight from campus. I came as fast as I could, Sel Hwa said, dropping her bag on the chair and grabbing Joanna's uninjured hand. "Tell me what happened. All I heard was that there was an accident on site." Joanna told her everything, from the swinging beam to the fall to the moment Gisak stood over her without a shred of sympathy in his eyes. Selwa's expression darkened with every word. By the time Joanna finished, her friend was practically shaking with anger. "You fired you while you were bleeding on the ground?" Selwa's voice rose. "Joanna, you saved someone's life. That man should be thanking you, not screaming at you like you're a criminal." "I know," Joanna said softly, "but it doesn't matter what I know. It matters what he decided." "This isn't fair," Selwa said. "You needed that job, your tuition." "I'll figure it out," Joanna cut in, though her voice cracked slightly on the last word. She had been counting on this job to cover the next semester's fees. Construction labor paid well, and it paid fast, which is exactly what she needed as an international student trying to survive in Seoul without family nearby to help her. Selwa sat on the edge of the bed, quiet for a moment. "You always do this," she said gently. "You always say you'll figure it out, but you don't have to carry everything alone, you know?" Joanna managed a small, tired smile. "I'm not alone. I have you." "That's not the same as having money for rent," Selwa muttered, but she squeezed Joanna's hand anyway. That night, long after Selwa left and the hospital lights dimmed, Joanna lay awake staring at the ceiling. She wasn't crying because of her arm. The injury would heal in a few weeks. What stayed with her, what dug deeper than any bruise, was the way Gisak had looked at her, like a liability, like she was disposable. She promised herself right there in that hospital bed that she never wanted anything to do with An Gisak again. 3 days later, Gisak stood in his site office reviewing the incident report for the 10th time. The safety officer had finally submitted the full breakdown of what happened, and the words on the page made his stomach twist. The scaffolding bolt had failed due to manufacturing defect, not worker error. Dong Hyun had been standing directly beneath the loose beam, unaware of the danger above him. Joanna Okoli had spotted the failure seconds before it happened and pushed him clear, taking the impact herself. Gisak read the report again, as if rereading it would somehow change what it said. She hadn't caused the accident, she had prevented a death. He set the paper down and pressed his palm against his forehead. He could still hear his own voice from that day, sharp and cold, accusing her of recklessness while she sat on the ground with blood on her hands. His friend and fellow engineer Kwon Moo-hyuk knocked once and walked in without waiting for a response, as he always did. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Moo-hyuk said, dropping into the chair across from him. "I fired an innocent worker," Gisak said flatly. "The girl from the accident? I heard about that. Everyone on site heard about that, actually. You made quite the scene." "She saved Dong Hyun's life," Gisak said, ignoring the jab. "The scaffolding bolt was defective. It was never her fault. It was never her fault." "And you knew that before you fired her?" Moo-hyuk asked. Gisak didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. Moo-hyuk leaned back, studying his friend carefully. "You didn't even wait to hear her side, did you?" "I panicked," Gisak admitted, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. He rarely admitted to losing control of anything, especially himself. "So, fix it," Moo-hyuk said simply. "It's not that easy." "Why not? Go find her, apologize, tell her the truth." Gisak stared at the report again, at the line describing how Joanna had thrown herself towards Dong Hyun without a second of hesitation. He thought about how she had looked at him in that final moment before walking away, hurt but composed, dignified even while injured. "You didn't even ask if I was okay." Those words had stayed lodged in his chest for 3 days straight. "I owe her an apology. A real one," he said finally. Finding Joanna wasn't difficult. Nam Gyung-soo, the older worker who had tried to defend her during the accident, still had her contact information from the site roster. He used it to track down the small campus cafe where she worked part-time between classes. He spotted her behind the counter, her injured arm now free of the sling, though she still moved it carefully. She was laughing at something a customer said, and for a moment, Ji-sok simply stood by the door, unsure how to approach a woman he had humiliated in front of an entire construction crew. When she finally noticed him, her expression shifted instantly. The warmth drained from her face, replaced with something guarded and cold. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice flat. "I came to talk to you. Can we speak somewhere private? I'm working. Please, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Joanna glanced at her coworker, who gave a small nod, silently offering to cover for her. With visible reluctance, Joanna untied her apron and walked outside, arms crossed, standing a careful distance from him. "Talk," she said. Ji-sok took a breath. He had rehearsed this conversation in his head at least a dozen times on the drive over, but standing in front of her now, every prepared sentence felt insufficient. "I read the incident report. The bolt was defective. You didn't cause the accident. You prevented one." "I know," Joanna said simply. "I was there." "I was wrong," he continued. "I should have listened to you instead of assuming the worst. I should have asked you if you were hurt before I asked anything else. I'm sorry." Joanna studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You didn't even ask what happened. You already decided I was guilty. You decided it the second you saw me on the ground." "I know," Ji-sok said quietly. "That's exactly why I'm apologizing." An apology doesn't undo what you said in front of everyone. It doesn't undo how you made me feel. Do you know what it's like to save someone's life and be treated like you tried to kill them? Ji-sok had no answer to that. He deserved every bit of her anger, and he knew it. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I just needed you to know that I know I was wrong." Joanna exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders, though her guard remained firmly up. "Fine. You said what you came to say. Is that all?" "There's one more thing," Ji-sok said. "I'd like to compensate you for the days you missed and the injury you sustained." Something flashed across Joanna's face, and this time it wasn't sadness. It was pride, sharp and immediate. "I don't want your money," she said. "It's not charity," Ji-sok said quickly. "It's what you're owed." "I don't want it," Joanna repeated, firmer this time. "You think money fixes what you did? You think I want to take anything from the man who humiliated me in front of 40 people?" "Joanna." "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "I appreciate that you came here. I do, but I don't need your pity, and I definitely don't need your money." She turned and walked back toward the cafe, leaving Ji-sok standing on the sidewalk, holding an envelope she had refused to even glance at. He should have felt frustrated. Instead, watching her walk away with her head held high despite everything she had been through, he felt something closer to respect. If you're enjoying this story so far, drop a comment telling me who you're rooting for. I read every single one, and it genuinely helps me know what kind of stories to bring you next. News of what happened traveled fast. By the next morning, half the site had heard that Gi-sok went looking for the girl he fired, and most of them assumed it was about a lawsuit, not an apology. Yoo Hyun-taek, the senior construction manager, called Gi-sok into his office before the first shift even started. "I heard you went to see the Nigerian girl," Yoo Hyun-taek said, not bothering to look up from his paperwork. "The one from the accident." "Her name is Joanna," Gi-sok said. "Fine, Joanna. Is there a problem I should know about? Is she threatening to report the site for the accident?" "No," Gi-sok said. "I went to apologize and to offer her a position." Hyun-taek finally looked up, his expression somewhere between confusion and disbelief. You fired her in front of the entire crew. Now you want to rehire her? The incident report cleared her completely. I was wrong. I'd rather fix my mistake than protect my pride. That's not how this usually works, Hyun-taek said slowly. You know how it looks, don't you? People will talk. Let them talk. I'd rather be talked about for doing the right thing than stay quiet and let an innocent worker carry the blame for something that wasn't her fault. Hyun-taek studied him for a long moment, clearly unused to seeing this side of his usually unshakable engineer. Eventually, he sighed and waved a hand. Fine, it's your site. Just make sure this doesn't turn into a distraction. Gi-sok nodded once and left the office, already thinking about how he would convince Joanna, who he suspected would need far more than a single conversation to trust him again. He was right. Joanna refused his first offer flatly, then avoided his calls for nearly a week. It was only after running into Nam Kyung-soo at the market and hearing the older man quietly vouch for how differently Gi-sok had spoken about her since the accident that she finally agreed to hear him out a second time. Over the following 2 weeks, Gi-sok found himself thinking about Joanna more than he expected. He asked around the university records office, using his connections from a past project, and learned that she was studying civil engineering, the same field he had built his entire career on. Her grades were exceptional. Her professors described her as sharp, disciplined, and endlessly curious about structural design. The more he learned, the more his guilt deepened. He hadn't just fired a hard-working laborer, he had dismissed a future engineer, someone who understood construction principles on a level most of his temporary workers never bothered to grasp. He returned to the cafe one evening, this time without an envelope, without any offer of money. Joanna looked up when the bell above the door rang, and her expression tightened when she saw him again. "You're persistent," Joanna said, not quite as coldly as before. "I have a proposal," Gi-sok said. "Not charity, a real position. I need an assistant on site who understands structural concepts and can help catch problems before they become dangerous. I looked into your academic record. You're exactly the kind of person I need." Joanna crossed her arms. "You fired me 2 weeks ago." "I know. And now you want to rehire me?" "Yes." "Why should I say yes to that?" Joanna considered her answer carefully. "Because you're talented, and I was too blinded by my own fear of failure to see it the first time. I'm not offering this because I feel guilty. I'm offering it because you deserve the position, and I need someone like you on my team." Joanna studied him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to refuse simply out of pride, but another part of her, the practical one that had been counting coins for tuition every single week, knew that this was an opportunity she couldn't afford to dismiss out of spite. "If I accept," she said slowly, "you treat me exactly like every other worker, no special treatment, no favors. And if I make a mistake, you talk to me like a person, not like a criminal." "Agreed," Gi-sok said, without hesitation. "I mean it," Joanna pressed. "The first time you raise your voice at me like that again, I walk away and I never come back."
"You have my word," he said. Joanna extended her hand and Gi-sok shook it, feeling an odd sense of relief settle in his chest, though he couldn't quite explain why it mattered so much to him. The following weeks tested that promise more than either of them expected. Joanna returned to the site cautiously, watching Gi-sok closely for any sign that his old temper would resurface. It didn't. When she made a small measurement error during her second week, he corrected her calmly, explaining exactly where the mistake happened, instead of berating her in front of others. "You transpose the load figures here," he said, tapping the blueprint. "It happens. Just double-check your columns before submitting the next report." Joanna blinked, surprised by how normal his tone sounded. "Is that it? No lecture?" "Should there be one?" Ji-sok asked, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. "I don't know," Joanna admitted. "I was expecting one." "I told you I'd changed," he said, simply, before walking away to check on another section of the site. Slowly, Joanna began to notice small shifts in him. He still expected excellence. He still walked the site with the same intensity he always had, but the harshness that once defined him had softened into something steadier, something closer to genuine mentorship. One afternoon, while reviewing structural drawings together, Joanna noticed something the senior engineers had overlooked. A support beam on the east wing had been miscalculated for wind load, a mistake that could have caused serious structural issues once the building reached full height. She brought it to Ji-sok immediately, half expecting him to dismiss her concerns. Instead, he studied the numbers she pointed to, cross-checked them against the original specifications, and his expression grew serious. "You're right, this should have been caught in the initial review." He called an emergency meeting with the senior engineers that same afternoon and presented Joanna's findings without hesitation and giving her full credit in front of everyone. "Joanna caught this," he said, plainly. "If she hadn't, we would have discovered it after the wall was already poured." The senior engineers exchanged surprised glances, clearly not accustomed to seeing Ji-sok praise a junior worker so openly. Joanna felt her face warm, not from embarrassment this time, but from something closer to pride. That evening, after the site cleared out, Ji-sok found her packing up her notebooks near the site trailer. "Thank you for catching that today," he said. "That could have been a serious problem." "It's my job," Joanna said, though she couldn't quite hide the small smile tugging at her lips. "It's more than that," Ji-sok said. "You have an instinct for this. Most engineers with 10 years of experience miss things like that." Joanna looked up at him, studying his face carefully. "Why are you being so kind to me lately?" The question caught him off guard. He hesitated before answering. "Because I was wrong about you from the very beginning, and I don't want to keep making that mistake." They stood there for a moment, the construction site quiet around them, the evening light stretching long shadows across the concrete foundation. "Can I ask you something?" Joanna asked, eventually. "Of course." "Why were you so harsh that day? Even before the accident, everyone said you were strict, but that day it felt like something more than just discipline." Ji-sok was quiet for a long moment, deciding how much to share. "Early in my career, I worked on a project where a scaffolding collapse killed 2 workers. I wasn't the lead engineer, but I was on the safety team. I missed something, a crack in the support structure that should have been obvious if I had looked closer." Joanna's expression softened. "Ji-sok, I've spent every year since then terrified of missing something again. When I saw you on the ground that day, all I could think about were those 2 men. I reacted out of fear, not logic. It doesn't excuse how I treated you, but it's the truth." Joanna absorbed his words carefully. She understood now where his harshness came from, the years of guilt buried beneath his strict exterior, but understanding didn't erase what happened. "I get it," she said softly, "but understanding you doesn't mean what you did to me was right." "I know," Ji-sok said. "It wasn't right. I just wanted you to know why." Joanna nodded slowly, something shifting between them, a fragile kind of trust beginning to take root where there had once been only anger. If this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me, take a second to like this video. It helps more than you know, and it lets me know you're still with us for what happens next. As the weeks turned into months, Ji-sok found himself looking forward to the mornings when Joanna arrived on site, her notebook tucked under her arm, ready to tackle whatever technical challenge the day presented. He told himself it was simply professional respect, but somewhere along the way, that explanation stopped feeling true. It wasn't just her intelligence that drew him in, though her mind was sharper than most engineers twice her age. It was the way she treated the other workers with genuine warmth, remembering small details about their lives, checking on Nam Gyang-soo's knee pain, bringing extra snacks for the younger apprentices who often skipped lunch to save money. It was her stubborn refusal to give up, even on days when her body ached from exhaustion and her mind was stretched thin from balancing coursework with a demanding job. Joanna noticed the change in herself, too, though she fought against acknowledging it for a long time. She found herself glancing toward the side entrance each morning, waiting for the familiar sight of Ji-Sok's tall frame walking through the gate. She found herself laughing more easily around him, arguing over blueprint details in a way that felt more like playful banter than professional disagreement. "You're wrong about the drainage angle," she told him one afternoon, pointing at his sketch with mock seriousness. "I designed drainage systems before you were old enough to hold a pencil," Ji-Sok replied, though his tone carried no real irritation. "And I'm telling you, the water is going to pool right there," Joanna insisted, tapping the exact spot. "Trust me." Ji-Sok studied the sketch again, and slowly, reluctantly, a small smile crossed his face. "You're right." "Say it again," Joanna teased. "I want to hear it properly." "You're right, Joanna," he said, shaking his head as he adjusted the drawing. "I could get used to hearing that," Joanna grinned. Their friendship deepened in ways neither of them fully acknowledged out loud, although everyone around them seemed to notice before they did. Nam Gyang-soo often exchanged knowing glances with Moo-hyuk whenever Ji-Sok lingered a little too long near Joanna's workstation, or when Joanna saved him a seat during lunch breaks without anyone asking her to. Moo-hyuk finally cornered his friend about it one evening over soju, the two of them sitting at their usual spot near the site's back gate. "You watch her the way you used to watch structural stress tests," Moo-hyuk said, pouring another round, "like you're afraid something's going to break if you look away." Ji-Sok didn't deny it. "Is that obvious?" "To everyone except you, apparently," Moo-hyuk said, laughing. "So when are you going to say something?" "It's complicated," Ji-Sok said. "I hurt her badly. I don't have the right to rush her into anything." "Nobody's asking you to rush her," Moo-hyuk said, his tone turning serious. "But don't wait so long that you lose the chance to tell her the truth. You spent years punishing yourself over a mistake you couldn't undo. Don't let this become another one." Ji-Sok turned the glass slowly in his hand, thinking about his friend's words long after they had said goodnight. Then came the day everything nearly fell apart again. A structural failure occurred on the north wing, a section Joanna had recently inspected. Concrete had cracked along a support column, threatening the stability of an entire floor. Panic spread quickly through the site, and within minutes, whispers began circulating that Joanna had missed a critical flaw on her last inspection. "She's the one who signed off on that section," one of the senior workers muttered, loud enough for others to hear. "First the accident, now this. Maybe she shouldn't be here at all." Joanna heard the comment and felt her stomach drop. Old memories of standing accused and alone flooded back instantly, the fear of being blamed before anyone bothered asking questions.
Ji-Sok arrived at the scene within minutes, his expression tight with concern. But this time, instead of turning towards Joanna with accusations, he moved directly to the damaged column, running his hands along the cracked surface, calling for the structural reports. "Pull every inspection record from this section," he ordered the site manager. "I want dates, signatures, everyone who touched this area in the last month." "Boss, everyone already knows it was—" "I said, pull the records," Ji-Sok repeated firmly. "I'm not accusing anyone until I see proof." Joanna stood off to the side, watching him work, her heart pounding as she waited to see what conclusion the investigation would reach. Part of her feared that even now, under pressure, Ji-Sok might revert back to his old habits. Solhwa showed up unannounced that afternoon, having heard about the crack from a mutual friend who worked nearby. She found Joanna sitting on an overturned crate near the equipment shed, her hands still dusty from the inspection. "I came as soon as I heard," Solhwa said, out of breath. "Is it true? Are they blaming you again?" "Some of them are," Joanna admitted. "It's happening exactly the way it did before. Someone gets hurt or something breaks, and I'm the first name people reach for." "And him?" Solhwa asked carefully. "Is he blaming you too?" Joanna hesitated, glancing toward the damaged column where Gisak was still crouched, tracing the crack with a flashlight. "No," she said slowly. "He told them to pull every record before anyone says another word." Solhwa raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "That doesn't sound like the man who fired you the second you got hurt." "I know," Joanna said quietly. "It's strange. Even after everything, I didn't expect him to defend me before he even knew the truth." "Just be careful," Solhwa said, squeezing her hand. "People can change, but sometimes it takes more than a few good months to know if the change is real." "I know," Joanna said. "I'm being careful." But even as she said it, she found herself watching Gisak across the site, hoping, despite every instinct telling her to guard her heart, that this time the truth would be enough. Hours passed as engineers combed through data, cross-checking material batches and inspection timelines. Finally, the truth emerged. A supplier had delivered a faulty batch of concrete mix, one that hadn't met the required strength specifications. The flaw wasn't visible during standard inspection, and Joanna's signature on the report simply confirmed that she had followed proper procedure, nothing more. Gisak called the entire crew together that evening, standing at the front with the investigation report in hand. "The concrete supplier delivered defective material," he announced, his voice carrying across the site. "This was not an inspection failure. Joanna followed every required protocol correctly. The fault lies entirely with the supplier, and we're already pursuing action against them." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some workers nodding in understanding, others looking slightly embarrassed for having jumped to conclusions earlier. "I also want to say this clearly," Gisak continued, his eyes briefly meeting Joanna's. "Joanna has caught more potential problems on this site than most engineers with twice her experience. If any of you doubt her abilities again, you're doubting mine as well, because I trust her judgment completely." Joanna felt tears sting the corners of her eyes, though she blinked them back quickly, unwilling to cry in front of the entire crew. It wasn't just the public vindication that moved her, it was the memory of the man who once fired her without asking a single question, now standing in front of everyone, defending her without hesitation. After the crowd dispersed, Gisak found her near the equipment shed, still processing everything that had happened. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing me. I should have believed you from the start, every time, not just today." "You did today," Joanna said. "That's what matters." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the site slowly emptying around them as the evening crew departed one by one. "Joanna, there's something I've been wanting to tell you," Gisak said, his voice quieter than usual. Her heart skipped, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. "What is it?" Before he could answer, her phone buzzed loudly in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and gasped softly. "It's from the university," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the email. Her eyes scanned the message quickly, and within seconds, her expression transformed from anxious to disbelieving joy. "I got it," she whispered. "I got accepted into the structural engineering internship program, the one I applied for months ago. This is the program that leads directly into full certification." Gisak's face broke into a genuine smile, wide and unguarded, the kind Joanna had rarely seen from Gisak. "Joanna, that's incredible!" "I can't believe it," she laughed, through sudden tears. "I've been waiting for this response for weeks." "You earned this," Gisak said simply, without a trace of the possessiveness she might have expected. "Every bit of it." "Thank you," Joanna said, still catching her breath from the shock. "For everything. For giving me a second chance here, for believing in me today.
I don't think I would have had the confidence to apply for this program without everything I learned working alongside you. Gisak shook his head slightly. You would have gotten here regardless. I just happened to be lucky enough to watch it happen. Maybe, Joanna said, but it means something that you were here for it, that you were the one cheering instead of doubting. I'll always be cheering for you, Gisak said, whether you want me around or not. Joanna laughed softly, wiping the last of her happy tears away. I never said I didn't want you around. Something shifted in the air between them, warm and fragile all at once. What were you going to tell me earlier? Joanna asked, remembering his interrupted sentence. Gisak hesitated, glancing away briefly before meeting her eyes again. It can wait. Tonight is about your good news, not mine. Joanna studied him curiously, but didn't press further, too overwhelmed by her own excitement to chase down his unfinished thought. Weeks passed as Joanna balanced her new internship responsibilities with her ongoing work on site, though her hours gradually shifted as her academic program demanded more of her attention. Gisak made adjustments without complaint, rearranging schedules and giving her flexibility she hadn't expected from a man once famous for his rigid discipline. One evening, after a long day reviewing final inspection reports together, Gisak walked Joanna to the site gate, something that had become an unspoken routine between them. There's something I need to say, he said, stopping just before they reached the exit. Joanna turned to face him, sensing the shift in his tone. Okay, I'm listening. Gisak took a breath, choosing his words carefully. When I first met you, I judged you unfairly. I hurt you, and I know an apology doesn't erase that. But over these past months, watching you work, watching how you treat people, how hard you fight for the things you want, I've realized my feelings for you have changed into something I didn't expect. Joanna's breath caught, though she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Gisak continued, I'm not saying this to pressure you into anything. I know I don't have the right to ask you to trust me quickly, given everything that happened between us. So I won't ask that. I just needed you to know how I feel. Joanna stood quietly for a long moment, processing his words. Part of her had suspected this for weeks, catching glimpses of something deeper in the way he looked at her during quiet moments on site, but hearing him say it directly still caught her off guard. I have feelings for you too, Joanna admitted softly, if I'm being honest with myself. Gisak's expression lightened with cautious hope. But I want to take things slowly, Joanna said. After everything that happened between us, I need time to make sure this is real and not just gratitude mixed up with something else. That's fair, Gisak said, nodding without hesitation. Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere. You say that so easily, Joanna said, studying his face. The old you would have pushed for an answer right now.
The old me pushed for a lot of things that weren't mine to demand, Gisak said. I'm trying to be someone who earns things instead of just expecting them. You already are, Joanna said quietly. Joanna smiled, relieved by how easily he accepted her boundary instead of pushing against it. Thank you for understanding. I told you I've changed, Gisak said. That includes learning not to control every outcome. They walked the rest of the way to the gate in comfortable silence. The tension of unspoken feelings finally settled into something honest and open between them. The night before her internship officially began, Joanna sat with Siohua on the small balcony of their shared apartment, 2 cups of tea cooling between them. You look nervous, Siohua said, nudging her friend's shoulder. I am, Joanna admitted. This is everything I worked for. I don't want to mess it up. You won't, Siohua said firmly. You never do, even when you think you might. Joanna smiled, staring out at the city lights spread across the skyline. Do you remember when I called you from the hospital, telling you I never wanted to see him again? I remember. I was ready to march down to that site myself. Funny how things change, Joanna said softly. Not that funny, Siohua said, studying her friend's face. You worked hard for this. He didn't hand you anything.
You earned every bit of it yourself. He just finally learned to see it. I know, Joanna said. That's what makes it real. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights flicker across the city, before Joanna finally spoke again. Thank you for never letting me forget my worth, even on the days I forgot it myself. That's what friends are for, Xiaohua said, bumping her shoulder gently. Now go get some sleep. You have a big day tomorrow. Months later, Joanna returned to the construction site, not as a laborer, but as a visiting engineering trainee completing her internship hours. She wore a fresh set of safety gear, her clipboard filled with technical notes instead of labor schedules, discussing load calculations with senior engineers who now addressed her with genuine respect. Ji-suk watched from across the site, a quiet pride swelling in his chest as he observed her confidently pointing out structural details to a group of junior engineers. The woman he had once dismissed as just another temporary worker had become exactly the professional she always dreamed of becoming. After her shift ended, they walked together through the streets of Seoul, the evening air cool and comfortable around them. Do you remember the first time you saw me on this site? Joanna asked, glancing sideways at him. I remember thinking you looked out of place among the labor crew, Ji-suk admitted. I was wrong about that too, obviously. You were wrong about a lot of things back then, Joanna teased. I know, he said, laughing softly. I'm grateful you gave me the chance to be wrong less often. They continued walking, their conversation easy and unhurried, filled with small laughs and comfortable silences that once felt impossible between them. Do you ever think about how different things would be if the bolt hadn't failed that day? Joanna asked, glancing up at him. Every day, Ji-suk admitted. I don't know if I would ever have noticed you if that accident hadn't happened. I might have gone years without ever learning your name. That's a strange thing to be grateful for, an accident. Not the accident itself, Ji-suk clarified. What came after, the chance to fix what I broke. Not everyone gets that chance. No, Joanna agreed softly. They don't. As they reached a quiet street corner, Ji-suk slowed his pace and reached for her hand, his fingers hesitant at first, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. This time, Joanna didn't pull away. She wrapped her fingers around his, holding on firmly, and together they continued walking forward into the evening. No wedding waiting at the end of their story, no dramatic promises exchanged beneath city lights, just two people who had built something honest between them, one difficult conversation at a time, one small act of trust after another. If this story moved you even a little, let me know in the comments which moment hit you hardest. And if you want more stories like this one, make sure you're subscribed because there's a lot more coming your way. Thank you for staying until the very end.